Yeah, before introducing you to our participants, just a few words on how Cascale and Wordly work together to bring you the Higg Index suite of tools. Cascale is a global non-for-profit alliance that empowers collaboration to drive equitable and restorative business practices in the consumer goods industry. And it owns and developed the Higg Index. Wordly, on the other hand, is an impact intelligence platform that hosts and supports leading industry solutions, and it's the exclusive licensee of Cascale's Higg Index. Together, our organizations make this tool possible, accessible, and impactful for organizations serving the consumer goods industry, with more than 24,000 Higg Index users worldwide today. So, moving on to today's content. So, we'll cover in this session the following topics. We'll start by navigating the EU legislative landscape. Then we'll talk about how we're using data for reporting requirements. Then we'll move on to Cascale's work on the Apparel and Footwear PEFCR Technical Secretariat, the Higg Product Tools strategy, and the deeper dive into current work and expected tool updates. After that, we'll have a section for Q&A, as we said, and we'll close. And now to our speakers. Yes, so I am excited to introduce you to our amazing panel of experts from Cascale and Wordly. Elisabeth von Reichestein is the Senior Director of Public Affairs at Cascale. Joël Mertens is Director of the Higg Product Tools, also at Cascale. Quentin Geleense is Manager of Higg Product Tools, also at Cascale. And finally, Paula Bernstein is Senior Data Manager at Wordly. So very welcome to all of you. And now let's turn it over to Elisabeth to discuss the evolving regulatory landscape in the EU and its impact on the textiles and apparel industry. Elisabeth, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Gabriele. So moving to the first slide of my set. We wanted to start, what is PEF, right? We will be using this acronym a lot throughout this webinar. So what it is, it's the product environmental footprint methodology. It was created and envisioned by the European Commission already in 2013 as a method to assess in a standardized way environmental performance. It is based on a life cycle assessment, LCA, to quantify the environmental impact of products. And this means goods and services. And also, why is it out there? It aims to reduce environmental impact throughout the value chain, so upstream and downstream, through better reporting consistency. Also, in this context, I will briefly want to mention that alongside the PEF, the PEF, the product environmental footprint, the European Commission also introduced the OEF, which is the organizational environmental footprint. However, since we do talk about product and product tools today, the OEF is not going to be our focus. However, for reasons of consistency, it's still important that there was also that organizational dimension to the European Commission's plan. What products sectors were included? The European Commission looked at all sorts of sectors. I have to look at the apparel and footwear at one, but also beverages, foods, and also construction. Construction is an interesting one because this is like the first where we actually see already, also links to regulation already more mature than in other sectors. And then also electrical equipment, electronics. So these are all the sectors European Commission looked at. And now if we move to the next slide. So again, what's the whole point of PEF? It is to create a common language and method for calculating a product's environmental footprint. So, and how does it work? So its foundations are the PEFCR, so the Product Category Rules. And these, again, define the sector-specific footprint measurement rules, and are usually created at industry level with industry experts around the table. At the moment, European Commission is finalizing details of these rules, and also like a global PEFCR for apparel and footwear is currently under development. So, and then here as a little teaser, so yes, what's the relevance of PEF for the Higg Index tools, the Higg Index product tools? So as well as PEF, the Higg product tools also are aligning with LCA principles and are therefore well positioned for alignment with PEF and for the Apparel and Footwear PEFCR. So now for the next slide, moving towards the legislation we're talking about. So yes, there are a lot of regulation out there, as you all know. So we did focus here on what we identify as the most relevant one for PEF. And these are, first of all, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, short CSRD, a lot of acronyms we will see today. Why was it introduced? So it's a drive for transformation towards the more sustainable business models across the EU, and also amplify the growing importance of ESG factors in corporate decision making. What does it do? What does the CSRD do? It established a standardized framework for companies to report on their social and environmental impacts through the use of common European reporting standards on sustainability, so ESRS. When does it apply? Already now, I can tell you, it's already now applying. Entered into force last January, so in 2023. However, yes, again, the devil is in the detail. The general reporting standards were published in July 2023, and then there will be sector-specific standards, including on apparel and footwear. And these are starting to be seen. There's a whole timeline of different standards to be developed and to apply. But this is foreseen to happen 2026. But as a side note, delays can also be expected. How does it link to PEF? Why is it important today? So companies can leverage LCA methods, such as PEF, to assess environmental impact, materiality, and PEF can also guide the calculation of indirect greenhouse gas emissions, scope 3. So moving forward on the next piece of legislation, this is the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products Regulation. This initiative was, interestingly enough, born out of the Eco-Design Directive, which applied to initially to electronics, like fridges and these sort of products. However, the European Commission decided that it's pivotal moving forward to have eco-design standards for a whole range of product groups, and also there put textiles on the forefront as one of identified as one of the most important sectors, and establish this eco-design for sustainable products regulation. It aims at, as the name says, to make sustainable products the norm through eco-design requirements, performance standards, and also to create a standardized digital product passport. What does it do? It sets eco-design requirements for specific product groups. So this means durability, recyclability, recycled content, whatnot. When does it apply? What's happening? So the final approval of the text, the legislative text, is expected in April, so next month, 2024. And the first working plan to be adopted in March 2025, and the first product requirement for textiles to apply mid-2027. So also in this context, we should mention that why the eco-design for sustainable products regulation is out there. It's just so short to being adopted. There are also sector-specific sector-specific a delegated act on sector-specific rules, also on textiles. So this is also something we at Cascale look at very closely and work together with our advocacy channel, the Policy Hub. Coming back to PEF, why is this relevant to PEF? Because PEF can help to identify the most relevant products to be covered by eco-design requirements and which need digital product passport. It can also support the development of specific ESPR rules, and also like a lot of the durability discussions, which are now especially relevant for the ESPR sector-specific delegate act for textiles, also do have very strong relation to PEF. Coming to the next piece of legislation, the Substantiating Green Claims Directive, why it aims to tackle greenwashing and increase transparency, environmental impact claims. It's what does it do? It mandates standardized methodologies for green impact claims. When? So adoption likely in 2025. So this is, also uncertain timeline, but this is what we expect at the moment. So negotiations in the European Parliament and the Council are expected to start late fall, I would say. Whereas like European Parliament has just recently voted on their position in the Parliament. The Council also is like trying to push forward. They're still before the European elections. However, again, since the Parliament still has to organize itself, negotiations, will likely to start in fall. How does it link to PEF? So the directive may establish, because again, right, the negotiations are still taking place, specific assessment rules for product categories like apparel and footwear, and potentially based on PEF methodologies. We say potentially, however, we do see like mentioning already in the current text. So this is something which we do expect, and that also PEF can in this following this logic, and also the text as we see it right now could also be used for simplified verification of certain environmental claims. Moving forward to the next piece of legislation, I promised you there's a lot, but not so many more to go. So yes, country level initiatives. So there we will, again, don't worry, not dive into all countries out there in the European Union. However, just zoom in on France. France has been and probably will be until foreseeable future, be like a front runner on sustainability legislation. So this is also at the moment, for instance, with their anti-waste for circular economy law. Why is it out there? It encourages a circular economy approach, particularly within the textile sector. It requires verified environmental labeling for clothing brands. So for large companies, already started in January 23, for smaller companies in 24, 25. Yes, why is this important and how does it link to PEF? So the French label is based on a type of PEF. So one of our partners has called it's a type of PEF with a French twist. It has a very strong, like, I want to say also alignment with the European product environmental footprint principles and discussions. I mean, the French government has been actually part and like sitting on the seat of the PEF Technical Secretariat for Apparel and Footwear from the beginning. So they look at this very closely. However, they have taken it and they wanted to kind of go ahead and move a bit faster than the European development. They didn't want to wait. They wanted to put it out there. So there is a strong alignment. However, I just wanted to make like one remark of a difference. Again, important topic on durability, because the French methodology, which is, by the way, to be expected to be published in its entirety tomorrow. So this methodology also includes emotional durability to a, let's say, more committed extent than the European one. So this is an important factor which also has to be considered here. So, but like proves again that yes, common method on EU level. EU PEF is very important in this context. Let's go on to the next slide. Yes, another one, like a very new initiative in France, is a draft bill on really targeting fast fashion. Also, in some articles I've seen like ultra fast fashion. So the focus is really to aim the environmental impact of the textiles industry as a whole, and also to enhance consumer information. Also, a ban of fast fashion advertising. Strengthening of extended producer responsibility schemes for textiles, introducing penalties, and these new requirements would enter into force as early as 2025. But again, this is still a law under development. Why again is this important in the European context? That France is the French delegations also, fighting for this in the council, within the Council of the EU, like the environmental council, and also like just on Monday in the discussion, they like France together with Sweden and Denmark called for EU-wide export ban of hazardous textile waste to developing countries. So again, France is the front runner, but also pushes for these discussions within the EU Council discussions. So coming to the next slide. In conclusion to this session, this part of the session. So particularly for the textile sector, which has until now being rather under regulated compared to other sectors, the EU and also national legislation are becoming ever more stringent and want to do more. Also, the PEF methodology is likely to play an increasing role in future product and consumer law legislation. So we see it, popping up here and there and in the different pieces mentioning being based on. Also, again, the Higg Product Tools methodology is well positioned for alignment with PEF and PEFCR. And also the Higg Product Tools can support members to navigate the evolving legislation and provide guidance in their compliance journeys. But so the last 2 points, you say, okay, how does it look like? What role does data play and what does it mean? So this is something which will then be covered by the following speakers. And I look forward to hearing more from them and to hearing your questions also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. It's really fascinating to hear about the increasing number of regulations impacting the textile sector at EU level, but also at national level. So thank you for that. Now, Paula from Worldly will highlight how Worldly and Cascale work together to support Higg users. Paula, over to you.
Hi. Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm Paula Bernstein. I'm a senior data manager here at Worldly, and I work on kind of all things sustainability, data, and methodology. I've been here since 2019, so I've been around for a few evolutions of the Higg Index tools. Just to reflect a little bit, I started my career in life cycle assessment over 10 years ago, and I've been hearing about PEF and the French labeling laws really since I got started that long ago. And it's been kind of a long and slow journey in that sense, but now it feels like it's moving faster, and it's exciting that we're finally starting to see significant changes in the industry where regulations are starting to really shape the landscape here. You can go to the next slide. So one of the most significant changes that we've seen in the sustainability landscape in the recent years is the emergence of the actual regulations rather than just the optional reporting standards. And here at Worldly, we're committed to delivering the best data to help our customers meet their challenges. And as a result, we're now monitoring this legislation, and it's a greater priority for both Cascale and for Worldly. And through our partnership with Cascale, we're paying really close attention to this regulatory landscape and what our customers need in order to prepare and report on their sustainability performance and progress. My team meets at minimum weekly, often multiple times a week, with Joelle and Quentin at Cascale, where we get really deep into the weeds on PEF, how it's evolving, and what that means for our tools and the solutions that we're delivering. And the Cascale team also helps us understand the challenges the industry is navigating firsthand and helps to address it in the tools that we're providing. You can go to the next slide. And so, yeah, as we know, data is going to play a critical role in many, if not all, of these reporting requirements. In all the regulations we just heard about from Elizabeth, including CSRD and even California's Climate Corporate Data Accountability Act as well. The regulatory climate data requirements we're expecting to become more stringent over time. So companies can choose to comply now and get ready, or potentially face financial consequences later. And this is really a significant step forward for the whole consumer goods industry, since governments are now starting to enact these policies to address climate change at scale. So yeah, as these policies are defined, Worldly is committed to providing our customers with data that they need and the technology to help streamline that work and make it easier and faster to collect data. With these upcoming regulations, stricter reporting requirements coming into view, brands and manufacturers are going to need better ways to collect data and track progress. They're going to need to set tangible goals and report progress towards them on a more frequent basis. We know that a lot of our customers are already using the product tools to report on Scope 3 emissions, for example, reporting against science-based targets. So the idea that I know that Joelle and Quentin will get into in more detail is that we want to expand the use of the product footprinting tools that we already have to formally support these regulations as well. And yeah, we know that establishing these data collection systems takes time and can feel challenging for any organization, but we really want to be here to help navigate this. It's really not an easy process, but we definitely want to encourage you to start using current version of Higg Product Tools if that's something that's new to you. And if that's something that you're already doing, that's great. You can continue to scale those efforts and build a clearer and clearer picture of your impact the more you dive deeper into these tools. And so you can look for some exciting updates, some new features to help you manage data with increased frequently coming soon. And we also invite you to connect with our customer success team to learn about what will work best for you and your business. You can also connect with the team to understand how these policies like CSRD map into the Higg Index tools, including product tools. Yeah, thanks for your time, and back over to you, Gabby.
Thank you, Paula. Also, just as a reminder to all the attendees, please remember to submit your questions and upvote the most relevant or pressing ones in the Q&A box. So yeah, thank you. Next, we'll delve deeper into Cascale's role in shaping the product environmental footprint for the textile sector, and also the road ahead for the Higg Product Tools. So this is going to come from our Cascale technical experts, Joelle and Quentin. So over to you guys.
Thanks, Gabby. Yeah, really excited to be here and kind of explain a little bit more what's going on both in the PEF world and in our product tools world. Hopefully answering, I see a lot of great questions already in the Q&A, really kind of answering what we're doing and how we see this evolving forward. So if we go to the next slide, I think it is helpful to kind of build on the introduction that Elizabeth already gave on, what is PEF and why PEF? Because we do have already a international standard set of international standards that helps define life cycle assessment. And what was even the impetus to say, well, why do we need to go deeper than this? And it actually aligns really closely with what we were initially looking at with our product tools too, to say, when we look at life cycle assessment as a whole, it is it's a framework, and it can be quite flexible in how you look at things. You can use different data sets, you can use different assumptions. There's a whole host of different things that can go into a single life cycle assessment study. And the benefit of that is that you can always, I mean, it's like anything, you're learning and you're seeing what the impact of certain decisions are. That's really important to the industry. But as we start to talk about communication and getting to especially consumer communication, there needs to be a level of comparability, and to make that happen, a level of rigidity of how you handle that. So that's what PEF really is enabling for the European market, is to say, okay, we have this LCA framework that we're still aligning upwards to, but beyond that, we're going to prescribe specific details that have to be followed. So that can be things like the data sets that have to be used, to be able to say, okay, we're going to specify these data sets have to be used so that there's no differences in results with the information and the emission factors that get you to your result. The PEFCRs, which is the deeper level, so we have PEF, which is the overarching requirements for any product footprint study. And then, as Elizabeth alluded to, the PEFCRs, the category rules, and these are specific rules for a specific type of product. And that's where we can go deeper to say, okay, here's the primary data requirements, here's why, here's the hotspots for this type of product, that's why we're setting these requirements. It lets us go to an extra level of essentially rigidity. It's standardizing a lot more features, which then lets you get much higher confidence in the comparability of those results. So this is, I think, kind of just the evolution of why PEF exists, is to be able to really get to a point where there is more consumer level comparable results to be able to support claims. On our next slide, we dive into what does it mean. So I mentioned the PEFCR. Each PEFCR, each category rule is the rules for that are set by a technical secretariat, and we are no stranger to this process. So the Apparel and Footwear PEFCR was launched in 2019. We actually were involved in a previous round of testing out the PEF methodology as well. That resulted in a draft footwear PEFCR, non-leather shoe footwear PEFCR. And all of this was really supported by the work that we were doing with our members, both on LCA, our Higg Product Tools, and PEF. As I said, there's kind of this overarching theme of our involvement in learnings with the PEFCR process. The current PEFCR Technical Secretariat, the way it works is that the European Commission, again, kind of overarching view on PEF, saying, hey, we think this, PEF is important. We're going to set that structure. That then is at the PEF level divided into steering committees and technical advisory board. The technical advisory board looking really at the high level, again, overall PEF methodology. So what impact factors to include, how should you deal with some cross-sector allocation rules. That then is where we start to break into the product-specific requirements with the technical secretariats. I have another slide that talks a little bit more about what the PEFCR Technical Secretariat does versus PEF, so we'll cover that in a little bit more detail. But as you can see, there's a number of different types of PEFCRs, really trying to get down to each specific product category. I think one of the more unique things with the Apparel and Footwear PEFCR is that we are quite broad, actually, compared to a lot of the other products that are more narrowly defined in kind of how the product is made, the manufacturing technologies that go into it. Apparel and footwear, of course, is quite broad if you think of all the different types of apparel and footwear. So we'll be talking into where that maybe can introduce certain challenges or opportunities here. The Apparel and Footwear PEFCR itself is subdivided into 13 apparel and footwear product subcategories. And so that's the level where ultimately each product will have a requirement. So you can see like t-shirts, pants and shorts, swimwear. So if you're making a pair of jeans or if you're making a pair of shorts, these will all follow one of those subcategories of the Apparel and Footwear PEFCR. Perfect. I think we can move to the next slide. So as I've kind of alluded to, one of the things that really guides us and the work that we do with our Higg product module is that we wanted to move the industry towards a common language in sustainability, performance, and measurement. And of course, that extends beyond the product tools that we do. That really goes across our Higg Index. But finding a way to bring that common language to light, to be able to move it and scale it further. Also, as we talked about with the kind of LCA versus PEF slide, one of the benefits of PEF is that it can minimize the duplication of efforts, that now there's a very clear set of requirements that is supported not only with an individual organization's interpretation of LCA, but also really the much broader community, right? We're building the PEFCR as a technical secretariat that is further supported by a technical advisory board that's even broader, and that work is ultimately supported by the JRC, the Joint Research Council. I can't remember exactly what the JRC stands for, but basically the academic community of the European Commission as a whole. So there's literally thousands of pages of documentation that go into all the decisions that ultimately will show up in the final PEFCR, where we're saying, this is the information you need to collect, and this is what it then looks like in terms of your product impacts. Mentioned that we've been the coordinator of the Technical Secretariat since 2019. What that entails is really being able to bring different voices together for the purposes of developing the PEFCR. We are not the sole creator, and I think that's really important to note here, is that it's not just by leading the Technical Secretariat, that is a facilitation role. We also sit on the Technical Secretariat as LCA experts as well, but it is a facilitation role to bring the industry together to facilitate that collaborative conversation. So that is ultimately where we get into both the recommendations for the draft PEFCRs, and then finally to get us to a point where the European Commission approves the final PEFCR. So when we look at what the Technical Secretariat does versus the overall kind of PEF Technical Advisory Board, there are certain things that we deal with and certain things we don't deal with. So within scope really is anything to do with that specific product subcategory. So we're looking at the primary data requirements as it relates to apparel and footwear. What data is required to complete a PEF study? What are the hotspots, impact hotspots that are relevant to apparel? And also then turning that into the methodology for that specific type of product. So what elements of sustainability are we considering? One of the interesting points I think that we were key in bringing forward with our membership as well was product durability. So saying, a lot of LCAs, we are doing it cradle to grave. So you're looking at both the manufacturing footprint, the use footprint, and then end of life footprint. And with that use footprint, the typical approach is to have a fixed product lifetime. So you can see this even with the t-shirt PEFCR that was prepared with the previous round of creating PEFCRs. You say, okay, we're going to take a lifetime as 1 year of use that represents this, this impact. Bringing durability into the equation was really important to our members when we were developing our methodology for product module, and also then brought forward to the Technical Secretariat to say, one of the concerns with having a fixed product lifetime is that it can incentivize lightweighting of products, right? You can start to say, well, do all products have the same lifetime? And knowing that generally isn't the case, that you can do things that either extend the product lifetime or reduce the product lifetime, we want to make sure that can be factored in as much as possible. So that's an example of where the overall product lifetime is an element of how do we actually standardize that? How do we create that in a consistent way that it's not just, me saying that my t-shirt lasts 20 times, somebody else saying that my t-shirt lasts 50 times, that there's still a framework that we can slot everything into to include that as part of our product specific methodology. So that's certainly been a really interesting topic within the Technical Secretariat to develop that framework further from the core that we kind of provided there. Examples of things that are out of scope. So the Technical Secretariat themselves are not involved in any of the data set creation. So if there's questions on like, why is the impact of, this process this, or this raw material this, that is not something that the Technical Secretariat is directly involved in. The European Commission ultimately contracts out companies to develop the EF data sets and has their own review process to be able to approve those for use. Another example of things that are out of scope is the overall PEF methodology. So every PEFCR has to fit under the general PEF methodology. So we can't go and say, we're going to include new impact categories, or we're going to take out some impact categories. It has to fit within the already approved PEF methodology that is approved from the Technical Advisory Board. One example of this that I won't go too much into detail, but microfibers, of course, comes up quite often within the context of apparel and footwear to say, well, how are you factoring in microfibers or microplastics into your PEFCR results? That is not one of the impact categories for the overall PEF methodology. So while we are including it, it is included in a slightly different way than the single aggregated score. So you're going to have the PEF score plus a footprint for the microfibers, as opposed to integrating that directly in, because that would actually decrease the consistency with other PEFCRs. So we have to be able to live within that overall framework of here's the PEF requirements. We then refine it into product specific requirements, but we can't change from the overall PEF requirements. I think that was, a pretty good coverage, hopefully, of the differences between what we've been working on with the Technical Secretariat versus what things aren't included within our work stream. Let's go to the next slide just to talk a little bit about timelines. So as we mentioned, the PEFCR and for apparel and footwear has been in the works since 2019. It is light at the end of the tunnel. We're almost there. We are actually currently in a public consultation phase. We'll have another slide that gives a little bit more detail about that. That is essentially our second round of public consultation. So there's, just like we have to get to a final PEFCR draft, there's a number of steps that are mandated to be followed. So we've had one round of public consultation. We've answered that with the methodological developments over the last few years on that. Now we're coming down to the next round of public consultation. After that, that is kind of the period where major changes should be locked. Then we will finalize the PEFCR. That should be finalized by the beginning of 2025. And then at that point, that's where you can conduct PEF studies. So that's similar to any LCA report. You're being able to calculate out the results of your product using the EF data sets. EF is just environmental footprint. So like I mentioned, the commission is responsible for developing the data sets, and they call that database the EF database. So when you hear EF database, EF data sets, that's just referring to the data sets and database that has to be used to create your product footprint results, whether we're talking about apparel and footwear or we're talking about bottles and pet foods and any of the other PEFCRs. You all have to use the same EF database, which of course will have different data sets relevant depending on the product type. From there, we know that the SPR will come into effect. Green Claims Directive also comes into effect a little bit afterwards. And there will also then be another round of creating and updating PEFCRs, but that's kind of in the future. So really what we're looking at here, I think one of the key questions that we often get is, hey, you're working on this PEFCR. When is it actually going to be published? We are expecting it to be finalized in 2025, but you can already see the draft of that now. And that brings me, I think, to the next slide, which is that the public consultation period is open on the PEFCR. It's open for basically the next month. There is a link that we will hopefully be able to share here to basically let you review the draft product footprint rules and see what's coming. I think maybe one thing that I'll note here is that you are going to need a European login to be able to participate. That doesn't mean you have to be within Europe, that there's a way for anybody to create those logins, but it is in a kind of a, I guess, secure area where you need to log in, and then all comments are logged and responded to. So there's not anonymous comments. It is supposed to be all the public comments received will be shared back out. So it's a good way of kind of ensuring accountability both ways, that the technical secretariat has to respond to all the comments received, and we're making those visible so that you can see that we have at least read and acknowledged the comment, and if there's changes to the method, what change is coming to the method. So highly encourage everybody to participate in that if they can. It's a good way to kind of see what's coming with the PEFCR. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Quinton to talk a little bit more about the current Higg Product Tools strategy and kind of what's coming next.
Yes, thank you, Joel. So I would like to spend a few minutes talking about the strategy of the Higg Product Tools and how we plan to evolve it to respond to all these emerging developments, especially from a legislative point of view. So if we go to the next slide, a quick recap of what the Higg Index actually is. The Higg Index is comprised of a suite of tools currently containing 5 different tools grouped into 3 categories. So there's the product tools on the left, which focus on the environmental impacts of materials and products. And it contains the Material Sustainability Index, or the MSI, as well as the Higg Product Module. Then there are the facility tools, which focus on both the social and environmental performance of production facilities. Included there is the Facility Environmental Module, the FEM, and the Facility Social and Labor Module, the FSLM. And then lastly, there's the brand and retail module, which covers the social environmental performance of brands and retailers. And as mentioned today, we will obviously focus on the product tools. So if we then go to the next slide, you can see what the product tools really aim to cover. So the product tools really cover the life cycle perspective of materials and products. So there's the MSI, which really covers all production stages up until the final material or fabric manufacturing. So that's all the way from raw material extraction until that stage, also commonly referred to as tier 4 up until tier 2. And then the product module takes over and starts at the garment assembly stage and ends at the end of life stage of the garment. And together they then cover the entire life cycle of a product. And what the product tools aim to do is really deliver an exceptional set of data which users can use to produce better, more sustainable products, which will then lead to a more positive future. And the way we do that is by guiding product design decisions informed by that data set. And I would say the concept of accessibility is really key for the product tools, because we want a variety of different users with a different with different levels of LCA knowledge as well as data availability to produce consistent product environmental footprint results. So if we then go to the next slide. I want to spend a few moments talking about how companies are using the Higg product tools. So you can roughly categorize those in two groups. So first there is the top row there, the enable category, which are really the use cases where the product tools are fit for purpose and you don't really require additional resources to fill those needs. So we see often users using the product tools to identify impact hotspots along the value chain, which will then help guide where priorities and focus should be aimed towards. The product tools can be used for target setting, aimed to reduce impact over time as well. And there is material suppliers often using the MSI specifically to showcase their production process and materials to their clients, hopefully indicating how they are outperforming conventional benchmarks. And then there's the support category at the bottom. So scope-free emission categories can be used can be done using the product tools. If you are a brand, specifically the category 1, purchased goods and services, is a category that the product tools can facilitate in. But there is a couple of data points that you require outside of the product tools that complete that assessment. At the right there's the distinguished actions that drive lower environmental impacts. So obviously the product tools help inform, like I said, how lower impacts relating to products and materials can be achieved. But it's important to also consider environmental aspects outside of the LCA-based methodology. And then there's the prepare alignment to regulatory frameworks, which is the focus of today. I'll spend a couple more minutes talking about how that comes into play right now. So if we can go to the next slide, just to reiterate what Paula already alluded to, is that data needs are constantly changing, and especially in the last couple of years, we see a rapid development in what data is required and what data is needed. But data needs also vary by use case. And we have taken the PEFCR here as an example, that there is a distinction being made between what is mandatory, recommended, and what is optional. So the mandatory data is what's minimally required to perform a PEF study. But it is definitely recommended to also add this second box of information there to provide a more accurate, more precise, more tailored product environmental footprint, which provides better management information on where to steer your activities and actions next. And lastly, there's the optional data, which again make this assessment more product specific, but is often more difficult to scale to an entire portfolio. What you see here is that many of the data points are already underscored, which means that they are at least to some extent covered in the current version of the product module. That's sort of underlines again that the product tools are well set up to align with the PEF methodology. But there's also a couple of data points here that we look to, together with Worldly, we look to add to the product modules as well to provide that level of detail. We can go to the next slide to sort of summarize what I've been saying. So on the one hand, there is the different types of use cases and by different types of users applied within the Higg Index product tools. And at the other end, there is the changing landscape of data requirements. And in order to respond to those developments, we envision the product tools as a hub which is really our dot on the horizon, you could call it, from where we want the product tools to develop towards. Joelle will spend more time on the details and how we actually want to get to that point. But there's two things I want to emphasize already, and that's the two sort of half moons in the middle there. If we start on the right, you can see different types of results, different types of regulatory frameworks. And what we want the product tools to do is to, depending on the use case or depending on the result type selected by the user, calculate results in a different way in line with any of these regulatory frameworks, which requires different data sets to be added to the Higg product tools, as well as different calculation methodologies. And we're working together with Worldly to get to that stage. On the left there is then the product info tab. So in order, all these different results types have different data requirements, as I already explained. And what we aim to do is to make it as easy as possible for the user, is to harmonize all of those data requirements into a single set containing product data, facility data, as well as supply chain data, distinguishing between what's mandatory, minimally required, and recommended, but harmonize that into a single set, so that with one set of data, different result types can be obtained. So if we then go to the next slide, I want to come a little bit back to that use case of regulatory alignment, what you already said. And it wasn't for nothing that piece is in the support bucket, as we called it, because PEF compliance requires more than PEF aligned calculations. And it's really important to keep that in mind, because we aim to align the calculation methodology of the product tools with PEF to allow for that use case. But PEF also requires an extensive report to be produced that has to be verified by a third party. And although the product tools will support users in those elements where possible, they can't produce that automatically. So it's important as a brand, as a manufacturer, to keep that in mind, that there is also elements outside of the product tools to be built. With that in mind, I'll give it over back to Joel to talk about the specifics of the steps we've already done and the steps we will take to align our tools with that strategy I just talked about. Joel, over to you. Oh, you're still on mute.
Thank you. Thanks for the overview, and thanks for reminding me that I was on mute. That would have been really sad if I spent 5 minutes talking and couldn't hear me. I did want to just acknowledge that we're getting a lot of great questions in chat. Some of them might be covered in this next section, but if not, looks like we'll still have lots of good time at the end to answer many of these. So I think you've now kind of heard the overview of where we're going and how that ties to PEF alignment from Quintin. Going to talk a little bit about the specifics of steps that we've already taken and steps that we're planning to take, how that then ties into many of the questions that you have, and what's next. So there's kind of 4 areas that we want to talk about. We're going to talk about the kind of exploration phase, which is looking at what is the landscape that we've kind of looked into, what are the information requirements across those, what impact assessments does this look like, and then what does it mean for data sets. The one other thing I'll mention on this slide before we move on is, like the rest of the Higg Index tools, compliance is not, we don't want the sole purpose of the tools to be compliance. The tools should be going beyond regulation. So we're not just trying to have a PEF compliant calculator. That is not, frankly, that is not ambitious enough to actually get the industry on track to where it needs to be. So we are looking to say it needs to, of course, align to PEF. We need to be able to get results that fulfill that requirement. You have to, at minimum, be able to fulfill the requirements for compliance. but we do need to be able to go beyond that. So just keep that in mind, I think, as we're going through that's one of the layers where I think it adds a layer of complexity into the work that we're trying to do. But that complexity in terms of how we map over, how we actually build a system that goes beyond compliance really sets us up well and our members and users well in the future to say, it's not only about calculating your environmental footprint. That is just a data point on what your footprint is. But how do we actually make sure that we're driving industry towards lower impacts? And even what we've already seen with the product module and like different levels of data availability, once you get to the footprint number itself, even if you have some sort of supporting, level of here's what I used in terms of the recommended data, here's where I've gone to optional data, it ultimately gets washed out a little bit, right? You say, well, here's the footprint. If I have a t-shirt that the footprint is 8 kilograms CO2 and I have another t-shirt that's 10 kilograms CO2, that's the number that the consumer is certainly going to be focusing on. They're not going to be focusing on whether you've gone and collected extra data beyond the minimum that you have had to. And how do we actually create a data pool to really drive more complete data assessment? Because the more complete data assessment we can get, the more granular the LCAs can get in the future, the better next version of PEFCRs become. We have this whole virtuous cycle of driving sustainability action. So I'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into it too. But really, let's start with the exploration on kind of regulatory alignment. So just to start off, I think it's worth acknowledging that our product module methodology, which here you'll see it was published in 2021, so we're still showing the Sustainable Apparel Coalition logo because that is what it was published under. It'll be updated in the future, but the current version, it's still this version here. We published that in 2021, and this was already developed with the Apparel and Footwear PEFCR in mind. So the initial conversations for the product module methodology really kicked off back in 2017 and 2018. That, even as draft form, informed the early conversations in the Technical Secretariat for the PEFCR. But as that conversation moved forward, we took steps to align where we could easily update to the PEFCR. So for instance, the durability framework that we have in our current product module is a reflection of the durability requirements as of the Apparel and Footwear PEFCR draft 1.3. which again, now we've just released the 2.0 draft. There are some pretty significant changes. So we'll be looking at updating those in the future as one of the examples of information that we know we need to update. We can go to the next slide. When we looked at what are the frameworks that we really want to look into, this is where, and it starts to go into actually Charles's question very early on about, are there going to be duplicative results? What is this really going to mean? We do know that there are going to be different results for different frameworks and tools. For instance, even when we look at the Higg Index as it exists now and the product module there, versus two of the legislations we talked about earlier, both the product, or I guess legislative projects, the product environmental footprint methodology for Europe and the French methodology that will be used for the French labeling law in France. There are a lot of commonalities, but there are also going to be some differences. So we do expect that even with the same product information, it is very likely that you will have different results depending on which methodology you're calculating to, which region you're calculating to, how that looks. Some of that, I think, makes a little bit of sense when we talk of like data. If you're using different data sets, that will lead to different results. But others will just be a fact of regionality, right? The PEFCR is developed for Europe. If I'm applying a European consumer into that footprint, that is going to be applicable to Europe, but it's not going to be applicable to the US, for instance. So if the US, which they haven't yet, but if they said, we're going to have mandatory product footprint requirements as well, what does that look like? Even with the same product, it will have different footprint in different areas. And that's kind of the same for France. Some of the assumptions that are built are around what exists in France, not what is across Europe. So they're going to be very similar, but there are still going to be some differences. And I'm thinking how much to answer here versus I'll hold off on a couple other pieces, but one of the I think important things is, yes, there are differences in the results. There's differences in the impact categories in some cases. There are differences in the data and the data needs, mandatory and optional. But there is a way to bring this all together, and that was that hub concept that Quintin was talking about, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into one of the later slides here. So on our next slide, this is more just acknowledging that when we looked at our update, the latest update that we're in the process of, we've been looking at a number of different projects and legislations out there. Many are tied to legislation. One is, let's say, legislation adjacent. The international EPD system is EPD being Environmental Product Declaration. This is basically built on one of the ISO standards and is used internationally for product footprint claims. So we looked at that under the same lens because I think it's an important one to consider here, especially beyond Europe. I did see a question somewhere. Yes, Sandra asked a question about will we be able to calculate the expected footprints for digital product passports with Higg PM? Will that be the same methodology as PEF? The methodology piece, I think, is still under development. The legislation is still, or the project is still happening. But we do intend to see the product module be able to act as a hub for digital product passport results as well, even if there is a difference between PEF and the digital product passport DPP. So that's that kind of core concept of the hub, is that you can enter your information and get whatever output you need, whether that aligns perfectly or whether that is going to have slight differences. That's one of the key things that we see the tool needing to be able to do in the future. I think the second piece of that, and this is probably a good point to mention, that is the product information side. And that's where we talk about, yes, there can be some different ways of how you get to the actual footprint itself. But what there is a superset of information that is required for that. And even beyond that superset of information required for legislation is the superset of information that should be available for, let's say, complete footprinting. So if we look at things, even like the product environmental footprint, there's a lot of optional data points that can be built out that go beyond kind of the core requirements, and making sure that we can add as much detail into that as possible, so that we're setting up not just for minimum PEF compliance, but really, as I mentioned earlier, full sustainability performance in the future. So we did have a product, an MET. So I'll pause very briefly to just explain that concept. So we have METs, member expert teams. That's where we get, we as the technical experts at Cascale are not doing all this work in isolation. We're working with member experts at each of our member companies, or all the member companies that are looking to join that, to inform how we shape our tools and how we shape, our conversations with legislation as well, to make it more effective. And that one, I think, one of our strengths is that that's looking not only from brand perspective, but we have manufacturers and other affiliates that can really round out that viewpoint sometimes. So one of the areas where we had an MET in the last year was really looking at product information and what product information we should update the product module to, taking that viewpoint of, first off, meeting compliance requirements, both current and future visions of that, as well as if there were any other aspects of data that maybe aren't necessarily covered in those currently, but could be in the future that we want to include and try to have the industry collect more data on. I'll move on to the next slide because I think I come back to that point a little bit later as well. So yeah, this is just a slide to show that a lot of the work that's happening is happening in parallel. So we talked about the PEF methodology development. That's with the Technical Secretariat. That is, again, hopefully going to be wrapping up in early 2025. There's the ADEM methodology, or I should say the methodology for the French labeling that is in development and will be released very soon. Each of those will have its own set of requirements, its own data requirements. And as those are ready, we see those integrating into the product tools in the future. So that's one of those work streams that we're working on with Worldly, is to look at how that would be able to successfully function. The other side of it is really the information side. And that was where I mentioned the kind of superset of information to be able to say, well, let's make sure that we have the ability to capture all that information. Going back to one of Quinton's earlier slides on what information is currently able to be captured in the product module versus information that's required for PEF. Much of it actually can be captured today. If you're using product module, you're going to already have a pretty good sense of the information that you will be able to use for PEFCR. There are, however, some areas where we aren't capturing as much information, specifically around the facility and process specific energy side of things. So that's an area that we're also looking to improve upon, as well as some other areas that were identified with the product information MET that we can expand that may or may not be useful for PEF results, but are useful for ancillary uses like scope 3 accounting, kind of at a larger level. So that's where we have the parallel with the product information MET. And then one of the other areas where we see an MET in the future is that product impact MET. And this is where we're looking to say, where can we really provide the most value in going beyond regulation? What are the things the regulation isn't maybe covering in the same way? How do we provide better analytics out to really drive more comprehensive understanding of the kind of trade-offs that ultimately, and our goal, again, right here in the name, ties back to impact. So it's not just about getting to a footprint and a number that we can stand behind, but really ties back to industry impacts. And that's ultimately the goal of Cascale, and that's our goal with the tools. When we get to the next slide, we talk a little bit about the expected tool updates. So this is really trying to just point out that creating that single set of consolidated information is not the easiest path forward to align with any single regulation, but in our opinion is what is going to be needed to be really successful in the future. Is that what we envision is that by having that one consolidated set of information requirements, it lets you enter what you know now, what you maybe need to know in the future, that you can build your data over time to say, well, maybe I only know, not even enough information to conduct a PEFCR at the moment, or PEF study at the moment, but enough that it meets my requirements under the French labeling law. So let me enter that information. Let me see what I can do to collect more information over time, to really drive that loop of information to incentivize more and more granular footprint in the future. I think the rest will be covered in questions, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. Same with our next slide here. I know that there is a question in the chat, or probably several questions about impact categories and what that means for the product module in the future. So if we're talking about product module as a hub, any of the categories where there are impact requirements, we will have to show those impact categories. So if you're getting a PEF footprint, it will show all of the PEF impact categories. If you're getting an ADEM footprint, you will get all the ADEM impact categories. Those usually align. So that's where we are also, as part of our product impact MET, going to say, what are the impact categories that we want industry to most focus on? How does that tie into how we display information above and beyond those regulations? I think we can cover the rest in questions, so I'll go to the next slide. And this is just a visual of kind of, again, showing how that works. So we have one set of information on the left here with the product tools information. You enter your information that you know. That then can be filtered into whatever result subtype you want. Each of those subtypes requires us to look at the data sets, the life cycle impact assessment methods, and get us to the mandatory data requirements to get us to those results. And kind of one example of somewhat useful example is like ingredient lists and ingredient labels. If we look at different jurisdictions, they have different requirements for what information you have to report on a nutrition label. There are even differences in what nutritional information is considered. Like if you say like, what's the nutritional profile of a green bean, that might actually be slightly different in Europe than Canada versus US. But the core truth is, what is your ingredients? And that's the same here, is that really looking at information, product information as a core truth, product information down to the process level, building on the structure that we already have with the Higg Product Module and Higg MSI to really drive that granularity in the future, to really drive more complete footprinting. And I believe that is taking us to our last slide here, which is, well, what are some takeaways for you today? What are action points that we really want to leave you with? Gathering product information, product data is number one. You're going to need product relevant information. There's already a lot of things that you can do. I think what I want to highlight here is that includes facility and process level information. It's not enough just to know your facilities, but you do have to have a semblance of which processes are going in there. That's going to be one of those things that lets you refine your PEF result, for instance, is being able to look at the EF data sets that you need to use. Okay, I need to know if it's, a ring spun yarn or a continuous filament yarn. These are actually going to lead to different results, even if I'm filtering in my facility level energy profile on top of that. Contributing to METs, so this is really applicable to our Cascale members. We have these METs to really be able to shape the direction of the tools, and we want your involvement as much as possible to really ensure we're taking the broadest perspective. I think there's the quote, kind of go far, or go fast alone, go far together, and that's always been our approach there. There is the public consultation on the PEFCR and also ESPR. Contribute to those and really just stay engaged with us. We want to support you on our compliance journey, both Cascale and Wordly, and we look forward to doing that and answering all your questions. And yes, I'll turn it back over to Gabby now.
Thank you so much, Joel and Quentin. And really a big thank you to all of our speakers today for this insightful presentation. So now we still have around 15 minutes. So let's take some questions submitted by the audience in the Q&A. And maybe I would like to start with a question on the regulations to Elizabeth. So with all of these regulations, asks someone from the audience, can you please help understand how this will affect companies in foreign countries outside the EU, UK? Will this apply to all companies who meet turnover requirements, who sell in-country online, or will this only apply to physical in-country based companies or brands?
Thank you very much, Gabi. I have to read the question again. I'm so sorry. So, or can you paraphrase again?
Yeah, so they're asking if regulations will apply to companies outside the EU, selling in the EU, both online or in person with brick and mortar stores.
Thank you about that one. Yes, very a long question, but thank you so much. It's a very good one. With a short answer, yes. Because if you put these products in the market, it doesn't matter where you as a company are based. If you want to sell and put the product in the market, you have to follow these rules. So, well, simple answer to that.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Maybe another question to you. The European Commission, according to this member of the audience, in its substantiating green claims proposal, noted that PEF wasn't the most appropriate approach to addressing greenwashing. How relevant is the PEF still in this case?
Yeah, thanks for this question also. It's a good one. So I would like to relative that. So the European Commission has indeed not put such a strong role to the PEF in the initial substantiating green claim proposal as would have been expected earlier. prior to the publication. However, this is not because the European Commission as an institution itself lost faith in PEF, but it was more also due to political developments and pressures and conversations, but of course also valid arguments that PEF is not as advanced and mature in certain product categories. For instance, I listed some of them, but like in food, for instance, PEF is quite a different story and more problematic, such as in other sectors, such as apparel and footwear. So this is also why we have seen a development of the European Parliament and Council positions of like a stronger commitment, also stronger language on PEF than the Commission has initially foreseen.
Thank you. And one last one to you. This is very short one. Is homeware, textiles and furniture in scope for PEF and ESPR?
So indeed, like homeware and so let's put it that way. In PEF, not yet. It's not yet covered. Although we do know that, for instance, some of also the product tools can be actually applied to home textiles. But it's not in scope for the European Commission at the moment. Different thing is for ESPR, because ESPR does apply for, in principle, all products except like a loose list of exceptions. So indeed, for these product categories which I mentioned, also they are covered under ESPR. And with that, thank you, and also to other questions on the tools level.
Yes, thanks, Elizabeth. Now, jumping on the tools, I tried to group some of your questions on alignment of product tools with PEF. I'm going to try to pose them together. So, for example, Joel, some member of the audience asks how closely aligned to existing LCA and PEF rules are the product tools? Then follow up, how do the Higg product tools alignment with PEFCR compare to other tools that already claim to be aligned with PEF? And how do the product tools differentiate themselves from these other tools? And will this differentiation remain the same if when the Higg aligns with PEFCR?
Yeah, great questions. Thanks, Gabby, and thanks to the audience members for asking these questions. I think there was some note here about the 2023 KPMG review of the product tools, and whether they fully align with ISO 1440 and 44. I think one of the key aspects here, and this is true of any tool in this space, is the difference between a footprint calculation and a footprint study or an LCA study. So our tools are calculating an environmental footprint of a product, same with many of these other tools. For claims, whether we're talking PEF, whether we're talking LCAs, other claims based on LCAs, an LCA study is distinct from the footprint calculation. There's additional requirements that have to be done to take you to that full study level. So if you read through the PEF guide, for instance, there's an entire chapter on how you verify information and write that into a PEF study that is basically the substantiation of your product footprint. So even if you're using, our tool, any of the other tools out there to get to the footprint of a product, whether you can use that, you can certainly use that in support of green claims, but it is not equivalent to having the full package actually finished with a PEF study or LCA study in mind. So that's one of the elements there, is that for any of the tools, including ours, we're talking about aligning to the product footprinting requirements. Have we implemented the methodology to say, if you enter this product information, the footprint as calculated through it is complying with those requirements, PEF, French law, etc. In the case of French law, it is kind of built in a way that you don't need to have that study. But in the case of PEF, you are supposed to have a study that accompanies the result that you're sharing. So that's one of the elements that I think is just really important to keep in mind when we're talking about full compliance to regulation. PEF is an implementation of ISO 1440 and 44. There are study requirements associated with that I think sometimes get lost in the narrative. As to kind of other tools in this space, the one thing I'll say right now is that there's not a final PEFCR for apparel and footwear, and there's a lot of claims and maybe misunderstanding on what you can really say in terms about compliance to PEF or the PEFCR at this point. There's just no such thing at this point. I'll leave it at that. And we can move on to some other questions. And if there's follow-up questions, please, again, enter them in chat and we can go from there.
Great. Thank you, Joel. Now, also a question for Quentin. Will the product module be applicable for hard goods, such as furniture and home decoration?
Yeah, great question as well. So for those of you who didn't see, we are calling ourselves today Cascale, and we were previously called the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. And that sort of rebrand really emerged from our ambition to serve these adjacent industries as well. Because what we saw over the last couple of years is that these adjacent industries like home furniture, like hard goods, started using the Higg Index, not just the product tools, but also the other tools to assess their environmental and social performance. And our rebrand really, through that rebrand, our ambition transpires of serving these adjacent industries as well to create more impact and to create a more sustainable consumer goods industry. And obviously, now the tools have to follow suit, right? So it is also the ambition of the product tools to expand to these adjacent industries and allow for manufacturers and brands of hard goods and home furnishers to assess their products using the tools as well. Yeah, so it's definitely our ambition.
Thanks, Quentin. Maybe back to Joel. There are a couple of questions on will the product tools align with the PEF impact categories, and will they break down the impact by the same life cycle stages outlined in the PEF draft, and also a couple more on timeline.
So let's tackle the first one about impact categories. I think, again, this is where with the hub, any of the results, so if you're getting a PEF result, yes, it will have all those impact categories, the same breakdown as PEF. Whether that applies to kind of the additional areas that we're looking to add on top of that, that could be highlighting certain impact categories, that could be breaking down the impact in maybe more granular stages. One thing I'll note with the way that PEF breaks down the impact categories is it's a little bit different than like most Scope 3 reporting. So I'd say within the context of to have a PEF compliant footprint calculation, it will have to match those impact categories. It will have to match that breakdown. Same for implementing the French labeling law. It will have to match those requirements for how that's reported. And I think the question which the product impact MET will kind of help shape is what are the ancillary things that we want to display above and beyond those to support more use and understanding from footprint data. As to timeline, so this year the product information is really that keystone first thing that we need to nail and make sure we're collecting the right information. There's already work that is happening in tying in some of the facility level parameters into the Higg Index platform. That's also tied into the SBT work. So we aren't really talking about that at this point because we're talking about the products here. But one of the other things that you may have seen come out is guidance from the UNFCCC on calculating Scope 3 footprints and how you use supply chain information and pull that all together. So there's a lot of work that is happening for various purposes that are going to overlap with the needs that we have for the product footprint and product module here. Yeah, I think I answered both parts of your question there.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Joel. There are also a couple of questions about third-party verification. Is there a third-party verification program being planned for the Higg Product Module? And are you planning any cooperations for the third-party verification that will be needed?
Not at this time. At this time, that's where we want to see kind of how that lands with PEF predominantly and France. And basically, each of those might have slightly different verifications, and we'll be looking to say how those all tie together. But at this point, as it relates to the product information that a brand would enter or a manufacturer would enter, again, we want to just make sure we have the right framework to enter that information. How that is validated will be tied to the individual reports that are being generated from that and who the company probably wants to use. But I think that's probably something that once we have a more stable foundation there, would be looking to support more fully.
Great. I think we can address maybe one or two more questions. They also ask, what are the key actions being taken to improve data reliability and quality regarding use phase and end of life of apparel products? Who would like to take this one?
I'll take that one. That is a research question, not an individual tool question. So that's something that that requires academic research. I'd say with the PEFCR, this has been a topic. There's a whole appendix about emotional durability indicators, essentially, and how to better collect data on those, as well as for more granular use phase. But when we're talking about product footprinting, it is important that there is a level of consistency there. And we are looking at essentially what is the average consumer doing with different types of product? How can you then say, what have you done to modify that consumer's behavior while still making sure that it's verifiable information? And that ultimately requires more academic research to make useful.
Thank you so much, Joel. Unfortunately, we don't have time for further questions. So thank you all for participating. Thank you for the speakers, and thank you for you, the audience, for attending. We really hope you found this webinar interesting and useful. Let's see what's next. We will be sharing the recording of today's webinar with all of you via an email very shortly. And additionally, you will also find the recording of this session in our YouTube channel, our website, and also in our member-only platform, Cascale Connect. Also, we know we covered a lot of ground during this webinar, so we're going to help you pull out key points and takeaways in our following up blog article by a few of our speakers here today. And we will also provide you with some downloadable content. I also strongly encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter. You can find the opt-in link in the chat, and you can also opt to receive public affairs specific communications. So I really encourage you to sign in to keep up to date of our updates. Also for Cascale members on Cascale Connect, you can access more resources and discussion threads relevant to today's content. You will find more info on how to contribute to member expert teams and strategic councils. And just as a small teaser, and this was also one of the questions related to one of the questions on our Q&A, we'll be publishing a new toolkit resources in the area of product footprinting next month. Lastly, for the looking ahead, we are very excited to announce that the next webinar in this series will be focusing on CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and its connection to the Brand and Retail module. So stay tuned for further details, and thank you all for joining us today. See you very soon.